And so I didn't just want to have professional success. So my mindset said, I want to have a life that has success in spiritually, in family, in business, in community. And I felt like at that time, having that being tied to the profession in corporate America, it wasn't going to really allow me to fulfill the mindset that I had of wanting to be an entrepreneur.
Welcome back to the Shattered Mindset podcast, where we explore the pivotal moments that redefine our thinking and set us on new paths. I'm your host, Melvin Larry, and I'm excited to be here with my dear friend, Bertram Calhoun. So, welcome to this podcast where, listen, we talk about life's detours and defining moments, and we're just going to have a good time sharing some information. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well today.
Man,
Good to
it's so
see you.
good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Really good to see you. How was your day?
I had a real productive day.
Yeah, get a lot done.
Got a lot done,
You
solved some problems.
live to fight another day.
That's right.
That's
Another day in
good.
paradise.
Another day in paradise. Another day in paradise. Well, it's good to be able to chat with you, and sitting down chatting with you is nothing new, but it's new today.
That's
You
right.
know, and so I'm honored to have an opportunity to speak with you because you've done a lot of things and in the world of business and in the network marketing space and in engineering and uh, team building, things of that sort. So you've accomplished quite a lot in your time in life. So tell me, just kind of reach back and just kind of let the audience know who Bert Calhoun is.
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and we've been knowing each other for over a couple of decades.
Wow.
So it's always a pleasure just to break bread with you or
Yeah.
to share some words.
Yeah.
And but to answer your question, I'm originally from California, and I grew up a real carefree type of lifestyle, and just really enjoyed the California sunshine and just kind of that ability to just explore things. And
Hmm.
I got into sports early and
Okay.
realized, which is unusual, as a young child, I wanted to be an engineer, and my grandparents lived in Tucson, and so I jumped on an Amtrak train at 5 years of age, and
What?
I said, I want to
You
be
and who else?
and my mama.
Wow. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. And I wanted to be a locomotive engineer.
Okay.
And so just really had a really fun childhood, and that allowed me to just really, you talked about business,
Yeah.
to just, the way my mother raised me was to be able to just think about possibilities. And
Wow.
so, in the 70s and 80s when I grew up, I didn't feel like there were anything really holding me back.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of, I was groomed in that way. And when I identified wanting to be an engineer so young
Right.
and just being able to travel at a young age,
Yeah.
it just, again, it helped me to just really, just dream a lot of, children dream, but it just helped me to really, just look at that type of life and just really be in the moment. Yeah.
You talked about engineering, you talked about sports. A lot of times, as you well know, when kids are coming up, there's the kid who's interested in engineering, and then there's a kid who's interested in sports.
Mm.
How did you find a way, or and obviously as a kid it was maybe not intentional and it may have been, but how did you find your way able to look at them both at the same time, or am I looking at that the wrong way?
No, you are. And really, when I was in that space as a child, the travel and being able to be on that train just gave me more exposure. So, to me, it was a way to see my grandparents.
Yeah.
But I was fascinated by that. But as I began to have teachers, and this was really to really answer a question, this was critical. I had teachers that began to see things in me and share things about me. And I got some comments that, you really like math and science, and that was shared with me early on as a youngster, and really it was I was in a public school. I grew up in a lower middle class area, Linwood and Watts, but they had a gifted program,
Mm.
and I was tapped by this psychologist, Dr. Clum. I remember his name. He
Dr.
got me
Club.
pulling these names out of my head, and I was 6 years old, and
Yeah.
they put me in this room and they gave me an evaluation,
Hmm.
and I had to put these blocks together. And I guess at that time I had a good day where I had some good breakfast, so I guess I performed well
The
enough. And they
blocks
said,
came together.
yeah, they came together and they said, you know what, we're going to kind of give you a more accelerated path. So as I began to have teachers see something in me and identify with me loving math and science,
Yeah.
that was at an early age. But then at the same time, I was a very active boy
What do you mean when you say active?
riding. I mean, just that boy riding bikes, getting into trouble, throwing rocks at cars.
Yeah.
Just
You all boy.
yeah, just and then the basketball. Growing up in the era, and not to do a useless plug for the Lakers, but 1980 Magic comes on the scene. I'm 8 years
Yeah.
old, and
Yeah.
the sports, LA, the Rams, the Dodgers, being this championship city.
Yeah.
Boys want to just jump
Everybody,
into the sports.
everybody
So
wants to get behind something.
right. So as you're making, I never thought about it, but as you're making me think, reflect on it
Hmm.
with that school type of experience, and then in being in a city where sports was, emphasized a lot, and we had some good championship teams at that time, they just kind of came together. So, being in school with engineering and the sports, it kind of just blended. Yeah.
So, how much, and you talked about the inspiration of the people who tapped you in quote unquote
The
to
teachers, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
the teachers and so forth. Um, how important was it that there were those types of mentors? I mean, you obviously had an aptitude for it, but how important was it that those people stepped into your life? And how do you see that as significant for people in general, kids in general?
It was extremely important because that was the positive side. But on the other side of the coin,
Yeah.
at the age of 6, my parents went through a divorce.
Mm.
And not only did that happen, but I come from a biracial background.
Hmm.
So I'm in a predominantly African American public school. My mom is Caucasian, right?
Hmm.
She's white. My dad is black. And the children, when they found out my mother was white, when she came up to the school for parent teacher conference,
Yeah.
they began to make fun of me.
Yeah.
So when I had teachers, we'll say mentors, speaking positively to me and giving me an expectation to achieve in terms of having seeing my potential and wanting and saying, you can reach this potential,
Yeah.
it helped to balance out feeling out of place as being this biracial child, and the children are starting to make fun of me. But before they knew my mom was white, I was just
Just one of the kids.
one of the kids.
Yeah.
But I started to be teased with that, and just me and you have a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
you're truly comical, so I'll say this: they said there was a song called "Play That Funky Music, White
White
Boy."
boy. Yeah.
I thought you could finish it,
Yeah.
and that stung me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be identified like that.
I used to be identified like that.
Wow.
They would say, "Hey, white boy,"
Is that right?
So I was identified like
Yeah.
that.
And so I'm dealing with wanting to fit in. I'm 6, 7.
Right.
And if I wouldn't have had some of those teachers to see some of those things in me, maybe I would have began to become more of a misfit and
Yeah.
got into some trouble. So that it was very significant. And then in general, you talked about just people needing a mentor. When somebody, especially as a young child, when a coach saw something in me, or for Children's Day,
Yeah.
or an adult, let's say a young aspiring engineer or entrepreneur, and an older seasoned person can see something in them,
Hmm.
they will believe in that person before the person even realize they have belief in themselves.
Exactly.
And it's very important for the esteem to be built. And I didn't realize it, but I
Right.
was just, it was a blessing to kind of have the good and the bad mixed in. And I just felt that the grace was there, and I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, so that support system around you, I can see it being instrumental in helping you to survive in that. What was it within yourself or your surroundings or whatever that enabled you to go from surviving to thriving?
It came down to who I picked as my friends.
Mm,
And I had some friends that started to, and again, this is, not to go too much into the childhood experience, but in the 80s, unfortunately, LA was plagued with the crack epidemic and the Bloods
yeah,
and Crips with the gang type of challenges.
yeah,
And I had some friends who began to want to go into some of those traps that I
right.
call for youngsters at that time. But and some of those were some of the athletes I was around, some not.
Hmm.
But because I had another set of friends that were pretty much on an academic path,
Yeah.
I was able to go sometimes between two worlds. And when I was around those who were more focused on the books, to trying to keep it simple, it really gave me another group of people to help me to be protected from some of the negativity. So it really came down to we my mother put it this way, birds of a feather flock together, just the old type of
Yeah.
the wisdom, so, and I remember one time I did something, Melvin, this is my godmother now I'm talking about, 'cause that village steps in when a
Hmm.
child can go through a divorce.
Right.
But she said to I had followed this boy, right? He threw a car on top of a roof,
He threw a
and
what on
a
top of?
car, like a Hot Wheel or something, on
Oh,
top of
okay.
a
It's like
roof,
I was like, who
like a little
facilitated the
toy
Incredible
car.
Hulk or what?
Yeah, so he threw this car on top of the roof, and I followed him and did the exact same thing.
Right.
And she gave me just a little bit of slight, you know,
Check.
little check, right? A little,
Yeah.
little corporal punishment, just a little check
Yeah.
on the butt.
Yeah.
And she said, and I never forget, she said, "Are you going to be a leader or a follower?"
Yeah.
She said, "He did something wrong, but you're going to go right behind and follow him and do what he did."
Yeah.
And so those types of things help me to begin to distinguish that I need to, be careful who I pick as friends. Yeah.
That that's huge. What were some moments that led you? That was a moment, but as you went on beyond that level and moving on into you know college and so forth, what are some moments that you found pivotal for you in your direction?
Well, I got a story. Is that
Okay,
okay to share?
man, I'd love it.
So I'm 17
Yeah.
and wanting to be an engineer, it morphed into not a locomotive engineer that drives trains, but a civil engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Or really at that time I wasn't clear on that, but more of an environmental engineer. I grew up in LA and there was a lot of smog. So I
Yeah.
wanted to, and there was a big talk in the late 80s about the environment, global warming, the ozone layer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the smog in LA was one of the worst in the world at that time. And we would fly in and see a orange ring around the city when
Wow.
we fly into LAX. So I'm late to school one day, and there was this young man, maybe 21, and his last name was Curtin. That's all I remember. And this is not significant, but I want to say it. He did a little bit of part-time dancing on Soul Train when you have to put the letters together
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
with Don
A little
Cornelius.
bit of trivia there. I got you.
So, I looked up to him
He
in
had a little
terms of,
celebrity.
yeah. So he's 21, I'm 17, and
Okay.
he had a car. I said, "Hey, man, I'm late to school. I gotta be on time." Maybe it was a test I was trying to take. I said, "Can you please take me to school?" I'm literally walking down the street, and I just asked him like that randomly. He took me to school.
You didn't have a relationship with him.
Just that type of neighborhood. I knew of
Yeah.
him, but
A rapport, but maybe
rapport.
something, but not nation. But
No.
yeah.
So I jumped in this car and I must have been very convincing. I don't know what he was doing, but he took me to school. And within that, about, let's call it a 10-minute drive to school, 8 to 10 minute drive to school. I don't know if he asked me this question or whether I volunteered, but it came out that I wanted to be an engineer and I was looking for an internship.
Wow.
And
With that guy,
with that
the Soul
guy,
Train guy.
Soul Train guy. What I didn't know is that this guy was studying engineering at Cal State University, Long Beach. So what he did is he gave me a phone number to his mentor, and his mentor was named Willie Gibson. He
Mm.
gave me his number, and this was before cell phone. So I wrote the number down, and then I ended up calling this gentleman, Willie Gibson. I don't know, a week or later or so later. He worked for the Department of Water and Power utility company.
Yeah.
So I called him up and I told him I want an internship.
Yeah.
And I had worked 2 or 3 summers of other odd jobs, custodial type stuff, worked at Universal Studios. So I
Yeah.
liked having jobs, but I wanted to now do something in engineering.
Hmm.
So he invited me to his home, and his home, he had a Jaguar. He lives on the other side of LA, the west side. He lived in a nice home and had some, we call it so-called the trappings of success.
Yeah.
And I was at his house, let's say 2 or 3 hours. And that 2 or 3 hour meeting, we'll call it, in his home changed my direction of my life because he taught me
Wow.
that you don't just want to be an environmental engineer, you want to go into civil engineering. So he helped me to pick the major. He was very big on HBCUs.
Hmm.
And so it influenced me partially going to wanting to go to Howard University. And then in addition, he said you need to join certain organizations, associations like the National Society of Black Engineers and the American Society of Civil Engineers.
Wow.
So he gave me this professional pathway, and
Yeah.
so he didn't give me an internship, but
Yeah.
what he told me is he said, "Hey, we don't know what may happen in the future." And so from that, just to wrap up the story, I had no idea that he would actually, when I was a freshman, fly out to Howard as a recruiter.
Oh man.
And he ended up giving me my first internship at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power.
Wow.
So that was for
Wow.
me
Wow. That's huge.
critical. He became my mentor up into even when I left engineering
Yeah.
into my entrepreneurial
Yeah.
path. He
Yeah.
still supported me in that, and he stayed a mentor to me until he passed about maybe 6 years ago.
And that came from you asking a guy for a ride that was on Soul Train that you didn't know him for engineering.
Right? I didn't know.
Is that
Lived on my
providential? Talk
block.
about providential, right?
I really, it gives me a little chills now because and that's why I can say the story so well because I really, as I've reflected
Yeah.
in my older years,
That's why
it
that
was a
that
blessing.
saying when they said, never despise small beginnings.
Mm.
I always believe, and I talk about it all the time, especially on this podcast. I always talk about how life and situations and circumstances connect. Everything connects, even when you don't think it does, even when it seems like, oh, that was terrible, man. That was a bad experience I had when I was 12.
Yeah.
It connected to something, that made a difference. And so, what do you think? Everybody's not gifted, but what do you think there's a message for younger people in that story of your youth there?
And I'll say this too about the gifted thing. It's funny. What I realize is that if you have a parent or you have a teacher and they expect you to achieve,
Mhm.
a lot of times that child will rise to that expectation. And there was a study done, and this was when I was late in high school, that said they did a placebo. They told these children that were so-called, maybe the IQ wasn't as high as these other children, and they treated them as if they were so-called gifted. And the other group that had a higher IQ, they treated them as they weren't. And they saw that those children who had let's say, a lower aptitude outachieved over or outperform those other children. And so I'm just glad again, to me it's more providential that I had a good day. And that's why I mentioned earlier, if I would have been upset, I had not gotten my sleep, I could have perhaps not passed that test, and then I could have been tracked on some other track. So it was just, I look at it as a blessing, but it
Or
just kind
not
of,
ask for the ride.
right. So I just kind of look at it like that, but
Yeah.
just really going back to when you have someone who has a certain expectation of you, and if a youngster hearing this now doesn't have that, let's say in a parent or what have you, the great thing about it is we have YouTube. We have uh, you know this world of being able to listen to virtual mentors and virtual coaches, and that can you can listen to that can speak to you, the greatness in you. If maybe you're in an unfortunate situation where you don't have maybe an example of a person, and you're being taught the opposite, then you can use that device in your hand for something positive. So that's what I would say.
It's just such a rabbit hole you can get down, and I think it takes some mentorship to teach people how to use that, because I always have to tell myself, use this uh, to be a producer and not a consumer,
Mm.
you know, and to not fall down in that trap. And so good. So, and it really goes back to mindset. And it looks like throughout that journey, even when you didn't know it was called mindset or whatever, there were different mindset shifts that took place. So it wasn't just a matter of events that changed, you changed. And what do you think contributed to some of your mindset shifts?
I had a really good year coming out of eighth grade,
Uh huh.
and I love basketball. So I was MVP, co-MVP. There was
Oh,
a I
okay.
was about 5'9", and we had a 6'1" guy. He was the
Right.
center, co-MVP. So I go to the ninth grade, but as I'm going to the ninth grade, I'm hanging out with my boys,
Okay.
and I love football, but I never played any organized football.
Hmm.
In California, we call it Pop Warner.
Yeah.
But I got this bright idea that I was going to play football as a freshman in high school.
Hmm.
So I did that. I had a lot of fun, but my freshman basketball coach penalized me and said, "You know what? You're not," because I missed a couple of practices because I had to have football practice. So when I actually the season started, I didn't appear as committed
Yeah.
as some of the other players. So I rode the pine. And
Mm.
for those who don't know about basketball, that means I sat on the bench a
Yeah.
lot of the season. And this is a kid who loved basketball since he was 8 years
So
old.
that was hard.
That was hard.
That was hard.
So that was something. But what happened is during the ninth grade year, I went into the 10th grade year and I learned that sometimes, your commitment, I didn't have all this figured out at that point,
Hmm.
but it was like I made a shift. I
Yeah.
made a shift that I'm not playing football
Yeah.
going from ninth grade to 10th
You
grade.
got your priorities straight.
I got my priorities straight. And that I love basketball is my love. Football was fun. So the 10th grade, I had something to prove.
Yeah.
I had a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
So I worked real hard my 10th grade year
Mhm.
and made the JV team, ended up getting MVP my 10th grade year. So I went from MVP eighth grade to riding the pine
Yeah.
and then back on top in the 10th grade. So I realized that, sometimes you have to sacrifice
Right.
what you really, really want to do.
Yeah.
And at that age, I wanted to do it all. I wanted to play football. And I had those who were a lot more athletically inclined than me.
Yeah.
They played football and basketball, and they were stars in both. But
Everybody
that,
can't do
but
that.
I couldn't do that.
For some people, it's just that, like the book says, the one thing.
Yes,
Sometimes it's just the one thing. So in your situation, you had your setback was a setup for a comeback,
right,
wasn't it?
right.
That's good.
So
That's
the
outstanding.
mindset, and I didn't have this at the forefront of my mind,
Yeah.
but it affected me because I took that into my college years, even though I didn't necessarily identify it and wasn't I didn't have what we call metacognition. I didn't go,
Yeah.
wow, it was later in life that I realized these things.
How did that help to shape your approach to setbacks and failures?
It's been something that I haven't necessarily brought it up to my conscious mind all the time. But I've had dreams about some of those things where you're riding upon you're doing good in basketball, but in business
The
because it's
nightmares.
yeah the nightmares But it's been so much in my DNA that in business when I've had setbacks in business
Yeah.
I've had to really, and of course, I had a lot more tools. When when I started going to business, and I learned that personal development deals with the books you read, what you listen to, who you associate with, and the classes you take.
Yeah.
So I began to have more of a systemic approach to being able to come back from setbacks versus just growing through it through having growing pains, but with the addition of the personal development and having those younger experiences in business, that experience really made me more successful in coming back when I've
Did
had
you
some setbacks.
were you in experiencing leadership roles in your youth like that, or did that come later? You've achieved something. Your career has really been marked by a lot of leadership and business successes and network marketing, business and coaching, engineering, and different things like that. So when I think about that and your team building, if you could just kind of share how you achieved success in the network marketing industry, what took you there from your engineering, and how did you, because that's a whole different world,
Mhm.
how did you go from engineering to a network marketing business and have as much success as you did there? What did that?
Melvin, you got me really reflecting, and it's really a great question. When I was a youth and in my 20s, I was very intimidated and afraid of leadership.
Mm.
If I was in a circle and they asked me to lead a silent prayer, I would get sweaty palms.
You had the silent part, all right, huh?
I mean, real nervous to do that. So
Yeah.
when I was in sports and in college, I never was in a leadership position. Leadership for me was doing my best to lead by example
Hmm.
and be a good example, which is a part of leadership. But me having to have influence on others for them to go in a certain direction, and whether it be two, three, four, five people, and I'm the leader and I'm guiding them, I was
Hmm.
very intimidated by that.
Mm.
So before I had some network marketing success, I was in five other network marketing companies over a 5 year period where I didn't have to be in any type of leadership role at all. So I
Mm.
learned concepts about leadership and team building, but I never had to really be a big leader. And in engineering, I exited as a project engineer. So I never took a path of project management before I
Mhm.
exited 5.5 years into the profession. So it was all about what? Me just leading by example, doing my best to be a good contributor to a team
Yeah.
and somebody else is leading that team. But the pivotal thing that happened is when I got into this last company, I saw a mentor who I really identified as being the epitome of a strong leader. So what it did for me, it gave me a model
Mm.
instantly because this gentleman actually introduced me to this company, and he was at that time he had some really amazing success, and now he's gone on to be really one of the legendary network marketing builders in the industry,
Mhm.
in the company that I'm a part of, and just in the industry period, and even outside of network marketing, he's been identified and been getting accolades with Entrepreneur of the Year by National Black Chamber of Commerce. So and he was the gentleman who introduced me to um, my network marketing venture, and because I was able to study him, I was able to mimic him,
Mhm.
and that gave me a comfort level to lead, and it gave me an opportunity to stumble in my leadership. But because I had such a strong example, it gave me the easy path. It's almost like you have a plane,
Yeah.
and this plane is leading the way, and I was able to be under his wing
Yeah.
and take. He took all of the turbulence and all of the wind. I'm behind that wing, but I'm able to exercise some of my leadership, and that without that. Maybe would have happened another way, but that's what got me out of my cocoon because
Yeah.
I was honestly afraid to leave. But I had a person in my life. Matter of fact, it was my ex-wife. I'm 52. Right? I just say it like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
She shared with me. She said, if you want to be successful, you're gonna have to really be a leader.
Yeah.
And when she gave me that
Right.
type of advice,
Yeah.
I said, okay, either you're going to be a leader or you're just going to be some average guy in the industry. And I took that to heart.
And I can see how that mentorship and modeling can make a difference. Um, um, but there are people who can uh, follow a captain and be a great lieutenant,
Mm.
but they may never be a captain. Um, at what point did you find your voice?
It was another negative experience.
Mm-hmm.
I I never forget. And the way you're asking me these questions, sometimes you don't realize the value of some of the things that happen that look like they're against you, but they really are really for you. You
Hmm.
know, and the Think and Grow Rich talks about, you know, when you have a negative situation, there's equivalent seeds of solutions and success if you
And
can
yeah, an
just,
equal or a greater benefit.
yeah, that if you can find them,
Yeah.
then you can take them with you and grow from it. But I was doing in network marketing, you have to be able to communicate. You have to have some charisma on some level where you inspire others to want to be better than they are. To That's one of the leadership principles with charisma. You know, if you have somebody feel good about themselves, then they'll want to follow you.
Yeah.
Not that they feel good about you, right? That's what John C. Maxwell taught us. So when you talk about having a little bit of charisma and you look like you're somebody that they want to learn from, then you know you want to have some type of you be attractive, right? So
Hmm.
I was on a conference call and they weren't seeing me, but they were hearing me. They were hearing my energy over the phone.
Yeah.
And this particular couple knew that my mentor was this company wide leader. So
Yeah.
they knew I was up and coming, but they really wanted to work with him.
Yeah.
So I did a conference call and
Hmm.
I was off that night. My energy wasn't where it should have been. And whatever it was, they complained and criticized uh, the way I did the call, and they said my energy was low,
Mm.
and they really wanted to work more with the leader who I was being mentored by. That stung
Yeah.
because at this time, you know, I'm building this team, this volunteer army, and you know, again, I always was intimidated by leadership, so this had me to, I had some doubt. So what did I
Right.
do though?
Yeah.
I called my mentor
Yeah.
and I asked him, I shared with him what was going on. I asked him for some advice, some coaching.
Yeah.
And he asked me some critical questions. He said, when you did that conference call, were you standing up? Did
Mm.
you maybe do a few push-ups before you did the call? Did you
Mm.
look in the mirror? Were you smiling? And so as he began to ask me these questions, I said, well, I missed a couple of those.
Mr. Cole.
So what I did is I told myself from each conference call or being in person henceforth, that I was going to make sure that I exuded confidence and energy so that I could be attractive enough for people to want to follow me because I felt like I was a good guy and I felt like I had a lot of value to give to them.
Right.
And so it wasn't an ego thing, but I wanted to be able to share and to, you know, I learned this concept of serving leadership. I wanted to serve the team, but if they didn't have confidence in you,
Yeah.
then it'd be hard to serve the team. So that experience really molded me to it was a line of demarcation. It was a distinguishing moment where nobody's ever said that again. And I was blessed to about 2 years after that be invited to speak in front of an audience of 4,000 people. And I think for about 15 to 20 years running, I've been blessed to speak to audience of 4 to 10,000 people.
Hmm.
But it came from that stumble on that conference call and
Yeah.
me really wanting to sharpen my skills in communicating with my team.
You know, you were able to develop your skill set in that area. You were already had trained the skill set, you know, in the engineering and so forth. And you know, people who watch and listen to this podcast are different ages, and some of them are like from 35 to 55, and different and younger and older and so forth. But for those who are right there in the middle or so forth, and they're looking at shifts and different things like that. You made a decision earlier in your 20s,
Mhm.
you know, to shift into something outside of your skill set. First of all, what made you shift outside of something that you had trained for, been mentored, and been guided to from college? What made you make that shift? And then what was it about it that helped you to excel at it? And what message do you have for the person who is in a quandary right now?
That's a loaded, but it's a great question. It really is because it was mindset. And just to sum it up in one word,
Mm-hmm.
I really, as is indicative of what I've shared today, I really want to be an engineer,
Yeah.
and I love the profession. However, I also had this other side of me that wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I had played with sales when I was in high school. But as I began to start working in corporate America, I realized that I couldn't express that entrepreneurial side of myself like I really wanted to. And even before I took my first job out of college, I was tinkering with a vending machine business.
Okay.
I had I call him Big Cuz. I had a big cousin. He had a friend who had a vending machine business. And when I was in college, he had faxed me some of his contracts. And I was thinking about, let me get a pickup truck. And I'm in my cubicle now as a young engineer, but I'm
Hmm.
thinking I'm in Boston. I'm in a new area. But I said, let me scope it out and see
Yeah.
where maybe there's a good location for a vending machine business because it can make me money while I'm in my cubicle. Because if I maintain it at night, restock it, get the money. And this is what I was thinking, get a
Yeah.
good location, get a good contract,
Yeah.
then I could make money while I'm working as an engineer.
Yeah.
But my point in saying that is my mindset, even though I wanted to be successful in the profession, in college, I wrote a paper about a consulting firm.
Okay.
And my mentor I mentioned, he introduced me to an engineer who had his own business. So my mentor worked for a very successful career, he worked for a utility company, but he introduced me to a gentleman who didn't become my mentor, but I met someone who had their own engineering consulting firm while I was in college, and I wrote a paper about it. So I always had this fire, this spark in me to do that. So after I'm 5 years into my career, my 40 hours went to 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. I'm a young man. I'm married. I want to have children.
Yeah.
And my mindset said that I want to be able to do things in the community. I want to be able to be there. I want to be the type of father I want to be. And so I didn't just want to have professional success. So my mindset said I want to have a life that has success in spiritually and family and business and community.
Mhm.
And I felt like at that time having that being tied to the profession in corporate America, it wasn't going to really allow me to fulfill the mindset that I had of wanting to be an entrepreneur because I wanted to at some point step into engineering. So that was the goal. Maybe 7, 8 years down the road, have my own consulting firm. But before I could get some of the other credentials in place and experience, by all this tinkering in business and sales and selling water filters and getting into the network marketing space, I was a home inspector as well part time. Didn't
Yeah.
make any money, but I was
Yeah.
under the tutelage of another guy.
Yeah.
When I began to have some success in the network marketing space, and I began to actually start making money from business and entrepreneurship, and I had a W-2 paycheck, it started to feel real good. I had extra.
Yeah.
And when it began to increase,
Yeah.
and then at some point it increased to the point where it matched my full-time salaries I was making
Yeah.
uh, doing part-time entrepreneurial efforts,
Right.
it all kind of came together.
Yeah.
And I said, I have actually some options.
Some
I
options.
can continue, or maybe I want to just go for it. I'm not 30 yet and just
Yeah.
take a risk and step out there and see what I'm really made of and see if I can be a full-time entrepreneur.
You know, what's interesting is that you've done something that most people haven't done. A lot of them have taken the shift like you did from your corporate position into that entrepreneurial space. You took the step into the entrepreneurial space and you built a massive business, tremendously successful, and said, I think I want to go back to do engineering. Not because your business went down, because your business was thriving, still is. And then you decided, okay, I think I want to step back into engineering. Tell me about that.
Now, some people have thought I was crazy for leaving engineering, and then some people have thought I was even crazier for wanting to go back into the profession.
Right, right.
But to 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 answer that question, Melvin, I made a I had a goal. That's one thing. I had a goal.
Yeah,
Number one, I said to myself, yes, I'm leaving engineering before I turned 29. My business began to take off, and it was just a blessing to be able to step into a new space, have a mentor, learn a new skill set. And then when I left engineering, the success began to continue to increase because I could have flopped, right?
yeah,
But I had five other experiences, 5 years. So it was a lot of failures, if you will, failing my
right,
way forward
right.
to get to that point. So it's not like I just kind of jumped out there.
Yeah,
But I made a promise to myself. I said, and this sounded like way out there.
Yeah.
At 28, I said, by the time before I'm 50, I want to get back into engineering. I didn't know how it would look. I didn't know how it would smell.
Yeah.
I didn't know how it would taste.
Yeah.
But I said, I mean, at 28 and 50 was, and I was like, that may never happen.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I'm 52 and
Yeah.
and you know,
50 seemed a long
it's
ways
a
off.
long way. So around 47, I began to think about that
Yeah.
promise I made to myself.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'm joining networking groups. And I joined this networking group. It was a faith-based group
Yeah.
of men in business, and there was a variety of men doing things. One owned a franchise,
Right.
one had a construction company, others, heavily invested in real estate. So just a lot of men who were very successful. And I joined this group, and I met one gentleman who had a master's degree in civil engineering, and he's African American, and he was a third generation owner of a construction company. So it piqued my interest
Mm.
because we would all have opportunities to share our business.
Yeah.
And I got a chance to share my business with the group and did a little business. And when he spoke at his office, and I saw him talk about his business and his model and how
Yeah.
he wanted to scale, I just said afterwards, I said, you know what, brother, I knew you, but I said, you know what, I want to, I may, maybe I can, maybe we can have some type of hookup where I offer you some services. I've been out the profession for a while. I have a very successful business, but I said, hey, here's some things I've done, and so it was just started as a conversation. 8 months later, unbeknownst to me, he gives me a call. He says, I'm going after these contracts, some county contracts in the Atlanta area. I think I may be able to use you.
Yeah.
And so one thing led to another, and I ended up starting very part time, working with him as an independent contractor. But Providence, right before COVID, I began to work with him on a very part time basis. But because of the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
when 2020 came,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't put the time into my business that I typically did because we were a face-to-face business.
Right.
We were doing some shifting of going with Zoom and virtual,
Right.
but a lot of us had a lot of free time. And my business, it consisted of me traveling to markets
Right. Right.
to create markets,
Right.
to strengthen markets,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the mature markets where I had teams to go to support those markets. And so now I look up in 2020, I had actually more time where I could
Mm-hmm.
even give to something like engineering, and they went to construction. And if I and so it just kind of became a very nice infusion of doing both at the same time, because I was primarily running my business through Zooms and virtual,
Yeah.
but I had this extra time on my hands. So the timing couldn't have been better. So I definitely, you know, uh, repeat your word of providential. It was just amazing.
Well, that is amazing. It's fascinating. It truly is fascinating. And you talk about the people and you are aligning yourselves with community. So obviously, community and relationships have played a great role in your success. And as I know, you have taking a path toward mentorship of young men and so forth. How has your connection with relationships and community and affection for that uh, affected you and benefited you in your mentorship programs?
And really, it's a phrase that you said that we would use a lot, uh, to be a producer versus a consumer.
Mm.
And going back to my college days, I had a great relationship with a good friend of mine. Matter of fact, we were talking on my way here. His name is Corey.
Mhm.
To meet you, Melvin, and we decided we wanted to do some mentoring in school, and we wanted to teach children horticulture. Teach them to be a producer from the earth, grow
Yeah.
something, and maybe even take tomatoes and create a product like a salsa,
Yeah.
and versus a consumer.
Yeah.
And this was right in the DC metro area, in an urban area, and so that type of interest at that time was my foundation for really wanting to mentor. And so I did that in college, and because it was really a mindset of wanting to be productive versus just somebody who's looking for a handout or entitlement, or consuming.
Yeah.
And as I began to have career success and then into business, I felt like I'd been away from that too long. It had
Mhm.
been too long, frankly.
Yeah.
And so in my late 30s, uh, I revisited starting a new mentoring program with another good college friend of mine in the Atlanta area. And we began to look at where our children were going to a religious religious private school.
Mhm.
And we saw that there was a need. And in business, my mentor taught me that if you find a void in the marketplace and you fill that void, you can become successful.
Yeah.
Wealthy is financial success, but you
Yeah.
become successful if you find a void in the social
Right.
arena. So there was a void. We knew some of these men, unfortunately, are boys. Some of the fathers, just too many boys being raised in a single parent household, and it was evident in some of their behavior. And we had daughters at the school, and we needed to just say, we need these boys to shape up a little bit. And
Yeah.
so versus complaining about it, we decided to start a mentoring program, and we ended up organizing about 15 to 20 professional men of faith
Yeah.
who had all types of professions.
Yeah.
And these professions, we matched them with some of the youth's interest. So if a boy wanted to be a cook, well, we had a gentleman who was a culinary artist. We had a doctor in this mentoring program. If a young man wanted to be a doctor, he could be partnered up with a doctor as a mentor.
Yeah.
And some of those men in that mentor program ended up being a part of the networking group years later that I talked about, where I met the gentleman
Wow.
in construction. So when I
Wow.
when I made a transition from Maryland to Atlanta, it was I didn't really talk a lot of business talk. I really was meeting people for community and religious type of connections, but those relationships end up spilling over into professional and business. So even though that wasn't the intention, but it just the relationships you talked about, it just kind of it was an outgrowth, if you will.
So, what have you learned from that mentoring program yourself?
I don't care who you are. I don't care how successful you are. Everybody needs a mentor
Yeah.
or mentors. Everybody needs a mentor, mentors.
Mhm.
And because I was blessed to have a mentor in that story I shared with you about that young man on Soul Train at 17,
Yeah.
by the grace of God, I learned early on the value of a mentor. He gave my first internship. He ended up mentoring me in personal in my personal affairs in life outside of professional life. And so with the mentoring, this he instilled a sense in me to each one teach one was his phrase, to always want to give back. Don't just take and go. If you're taking from the community or your family, you always want to put some deposits back into, I call it, the womb that you were birthed from, whether it be a social room or it would be a religious womb.
Yeah.
You got to give back to it, because if you don't, it creates there's the equilibrium is off.
Wow.
So to everybody needs a mentor, and secondarily that it's really you have to give back to that which you came from, because it's really it's reciprocity, and really it's you have a debt there, if you will, to use that language. You owe that community to give back to, which in which you got so much benefit from.
Speaking of that, how do you define success today? For you, or in general, and how has that definition evolved over time, say from your 20s? How has your definition of success?
In my 20s, success was being able to make a lot of money
Mhm.
and to have fulfillment professionally.
Yeah.
But two things have come up, since then. One is to have both fulfillment and achievement. Achievement is sometimes we measure it based on accolades, trophies, money, recognition, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's we achieve something. But a person can achieve things in a profession, and everybody can feel like they're successful, but they may not have a sense of fulfillment because they may be in the wrong profession, or they may not even really like what they're doing in deep down inside. They may like the recognition, but they don't really enjoy what they're doing.
Yeah.
So success to me is having that fulfillment, that I really am making a contribution. I really enjoy what I'm doing. And then the results of it, you get the fruits of your labor. You're also able to have some success, because some people have a lot of fulfillment, but they're broke.
Yes.
So success to me, it requires both fulfillment and achievement. But the other thing is from a gentleman named Paul J. Meyer, who I was blessed to be mentored by. He was a billionaire,
Hmm.
invited to his ranch a few times. He said this: success is the progression of a worthy idea.
Hmm.
So if it's a worthy idea, could be it's that's personal. That's something that somebody decides on their own. So I can't dictate what's success for you versus you for me, but success is the progressive realization, right? Because you begin to realize it, but it takes progress, it takes steps, it takes time. But success is the progressive realization of a worthy idea. So that is about the definition that I've when I've read and heard and been
Yeah.
mentored by people that I've really clung to.
And
It's written here. I can't even forget it.
you've lived it too, because you are inspired, and your story has the power to inspire a lot of others. So, what message or advice would you want to leave with these listeners who want to have success, but maybe facing their own challenges?
It really comes back to a shift in mindset. I'm an engineer, right? So when I think about concrete,
Yeah.
when you let concrete set, and it takes about 28 days for it that they call cure.
Yeah.
When you pour the concrete, it has a certain strength, and there's these nerdy graphs that go up, and it's over 7 days, 10 days, that strength increases. And by the 28th day, it has, let's say, 4,000 psi, pounds per square inch of strength. But that takes time. But once it's set, we all know,
It's
even if a person doesn't care about construction, it's set. You put that as children, we may put our handprint in the concrete. That handprint is in there. So it's difficult to shift one's mindset. And I would say that a person, if they really tap into what we call a person's why, that really at the what I call the soul stimulating at a SOUL, soul stimulating or at a gut level, that this drives them. That
yeah.
if they really feel like they have this purpose, this why of why they wanted to have success or achievement or what they want to do for their family, that can a lot of times help them to shift their mindset because a lot of times it's something very emotional has to come in there to break up the mindset, and I had a mentor say that you sometimes well, like in the 21st century, we have to learn things, unlearn, and then relearn.
Hmm.
So mindset is dealing with that. We learned a mindset maybe from school, maybe from a community that maybe doesn't serve us, doesn't
Yeah.
serve our dreams and our vision.
Yeah.
But if we have the ability to understand we learned it, but we can actually unlearn a mindset, but then relearn a new mindset and have the courage and the strength and to know it's gonna be some work.
Yeah.
But it comes down to who we associate with, the books we read, and then what we listen to in the class we take. So I would say just to kind of wrap it up in a simple language,
Hmm.
we all of us who are struggling with that, and we continue to fight that. I may have fight a mindset I learned at 12 because it's, you still got to fight it.
Yeah.
We're one book away or one person away from a whole new world, and that book or that person can totally shift our mindset and open up a brand new world out there.
So that's good stuff there. If you could look into the future, what impact would you hope to leave behind through your working life?
When it's all said and done, and I think about my journey and when I've read, let's say it's a biography or autobiography, and like the autobiography of Malcolm X had a huge impact on me, and it was his ability to have a transformation in his life. He was, street life, criminal type of activity, and then he dies at 39, is assassinated, and then he becomes this world leader. So that transformational type of exposure I got when I read that book in the 10th grade, if somebody was to look at my life, whether it be my own children, whether it be those that I've had in business relationships, whether people I've mentored, uh, any profession I've done, that they could look at a man who started from some humble beginnings. I didn't grow up in poverty,
Yeah.
but just the things I talked about, just dealing with some of the biracial issues and dealing with some of the violence I faced in LA at that time and some of the setbacks I've mentioned in this podcast, that I would hope they would see a person who was able to overcome. I've been through two divorces. So I've had I've had some challenges in my life,
Yeah.
but my faith has been a bedrock to help me get through these things. And I would hope that they would see a man who trusted God. And even when we say in our faith, be grateful during prosperity, but be patient during adversity. I would hope that I could at least share that as an example, and that a man who was not willing to, he wasn't afraid of risk, you know. And of course, I want to leave some, as I'm building up, some tangible things for the family,
Yeah.
because as we know, the scripture says a good man or woman leaves an inheritance for his or her children's children. So
Absolutely.
I want to be able to have things to say that are good,
Yeah.
but also too I want to be able to also leave some things behind as well to bless those when I pass on
Yeah.
and beyond, in the community.
Bert, it's been a extreme honor and pleasure to be with you here in this capacity. You have been a mentor for me for many, many years. I'm a bit older, but you've still been my mentor, and I've learned so much, and I appreciate you sharing with us. Is there anywhere these listeners can connect with you? Would you want to leave anything for that, or where they could connect with you if that's your choice?
They could connect with me on Facebook, and there's a platform called the Focus Networker. Right, that's one of my trademarks is focus, and I'm not
Focus
perfect
is
at it.
everything.
Yeah, I'm not perfect at it, but it
Yeah.
helps me to
Yeah.
give me a guidepost. But
Yeah.
if they go on Facebook and type in the Focus Networker,
Mm-hmm.
then they can connect with me,
Excellent.
and my email, and too, if it's something mentoring,
And that email is
program is bertramcalhoun@gmail.com,
Bertram Calhoun
because
at
it could be something dealing with just mentoring or community work.
Yes,
Bertram,
sir.
Bertram, Calhoun,
All right.
Calhoun @gmail.com. And it's been an honor and a pleasure. And I always enjoy time with you, whether it's on some of the best beaches of the world,
Yes.
and work on our,
We've
on
done
our,
some
our
of those.
tan and restaurants and
Yeah.
breaking bread, healthy breaking bread.
And just sitting down one on one.
Yeah, and just sitting down one on one.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Been a pleasure
God
too.
bless.
So, hey, folks, listen, we are excited again to have my good friend Bert Calhoun to sit down with us. And what I want you to do as you go forward, don't forget to subscribe, share, and like here. But in the meantime, keep adapting, keep adjusting, and keep reaching for those higher heights. Take care from the Shattered Mindset Podcast. Keep it.